Can we ask about your Gaza proposal? A lot of people are talking about, obviously, attention.
Everybody loves it.
President Trump giving Gaza Lago a 5-star review. 47 dropping a game-changing plan to bring stability to the Middle East with a proposed real estate acquisition to have the United States take over the war-torn Gaza Strip and rebuild it into the, quote, Riviera of the Middle East.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out. History has, just can't let it keep repeating itself. We have an opportunity to do something that could be phenomenal. And I don't want to be cute. I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so bad. This could be so magnificent.
Caroline Levitt giving the media some details on the building blueprint for the MAGA Strip.
President Trump is an outside-of-the-box thinker and a visionary leader who solves problems that many others, especially in this city, claim are unsolvable.
Can you explain this reversal and how building and owning Gaza squares with America First foreign policy?
I would reject the premise of your question that this forces the United States to be entangled in conflicts abroad. The president has not committed to putting boots on the ground in Gaza. He has also said that the United States is not going to pay for the rebuilding of Gaza. His administration is going to work with our partners in the region to reconstruct.
And right on cue, the liberal media and the Democrats are falling for the trap set by President Trump and freaking out over the MAGA in the Mediterranean plan. Watch.
It is part of the culmination of what I view to be genocide of the Palestinian people. And this is genuinely one of the most horrific humanitarian catastrophes that we've seen in modern history.
It's the wackiest idea, hard to say, he's ever come up with.
He thinks that the coastline of Gaza is going to be great for some new hotel.
It's preposterous and it's illegal.
American imperialism at its roots.
Ethnic cleansing of Palestinians.
Throwing a match on an already very volatile region.
I will bring articles of impeachment against the president for dastardly deeds proposed and dastardly deeds done.
All right, Dana, they say it's a crazy idea, but you know what's a crazier idea? Having the Palestinians live next to the Israelis.
Well, yes. Okay, so yes, when I first saw it, I was like, wait, what? We're going to do what? I'm like, okay, I'm here for it because you know how I am on all of those things. Next stop, Cuba for me. But I think this is the most compassionate thing that anyone has said about the Palestinians for a long time. Because if you think about it, what was the alternative? Go back to the rubble? There's no sewage system, there's no plan, and just allow the continuation of the festering of the hate against the Israelis so that they could lob rockets from Gaza into Israel? That was the plan? So what was Biden doing? They basically allowed Iran to continue to get more and more power. And I know that the Democrats are going to freak out about 5 things a day, and he knew exactly what he was doing. They certainly did that. But now everybody's saying, wait, well, maybe there is another way to do this. And what's interesting from the Israeli political standpoint, on Bibi Netanyahu's right, and he has a little bit of a problem keeping his coalition together because everybody's always after him and it's a difficult situation there. It's a tough neighborhood. On his right, they're very frustrated with him for not doing more, but they love this idea. They've been bringing it up for about 3 decades. Like, why don't we ask somebody to do that? Plus, if you think about what Trump did in the first term with NATO, he said, you guys want us to be a part of NATO, then you got to pay up. What this did is also say to the Arab world, if you're not going to help take care of the Palestinians, okay, I guess I will. I guess I'll have to do it. And now they're like, well, actually, no, and now you can have the focus on, okay, so what about those innocent Palestinians? What are you going to do with them? I'm not saying that there's going to be like, I don't think that any single, not even one boot of any American is going to be on the ground to do this. What it did is it changed the conversation. I think it's very interesting. I don't think the alternative to going back to the way it was before, to just wait for the next October 7th, was the best idea. I just want to add one other thing. Abe Greenwald is an executive editor at Commentary Magazine. I listen to him a lot. He has a new newsletter that's free. I think it's free. I'm a subscriber, but I think you can sign up for this newsletter for free.
Whew, thank God.
I think you can, but you should subscribe. But he said this today. Thomas Jefferson said, if you want something you've never had, you must be willing to do something you've never done. And he said the world is already different for what Trump put forward, meaning that now we can actually have a conversation about something else. And I think it's very exciting. And it's kind of fun to watch the Democrats freak out about genocide. Genocide? Well, what was the alternative? We're not talking about genocide. We're talking about getting them to safety and getting them back to a place where they could actually live in peace.
Greg, have you put down a down payment for a 3-bedroom condo?
I'm already investing in a Dave & Buster's. You know, being a new father, I can say that this is purely a dad move. You know, you're in a huge fight with your sister over the remote. Your dad comes down and he turns off the TV and he just takes the remote. Yeah. No Gutfeld. And that creates a common enemy. Dad. Right? So the quarrel is over. Now you got to deal with dad, and it forces the siblings to come up with some creative alternative. And suddenly all these Middle East countries, Jordan and Egypt, those are the kids, have to go, well, I don't want dad involved. What can we somebody? He goes, well, then maybe you have to start thinking about, you know, paying for the rebuilding or monitoring the peace or taking in some of the refugees. It causes the kids involved to go, whoa, not so fast. We didn't really want this. And they don't want America in the middle of everything, but exactly what you said. He said, well, you're not doing anything about it. And you're right. This is why, the way you described it, the fact that like he is creating a new conversation. He kind of forces the world to conform and react to him. This is why he's not a president. He's now officially a legend. And a legend creates a story around you, around yourself. And world leaders, they want to see him. They want selfies with him. They want to please him. It's a phenomenon. It's not about shaking the box. He throws the box into traffic. You know, he may make more progress simply by doing this than has been done in ages.
Judge Jeanine, when you saw that Donald Trump was saying that we should take over Gaza, what was the first thing you thought?
Oh, my God. It was like, what did that say? Look, you know, it's true that whether this happens or not, this is a starting point of a negotiation. Donald Trump is someone who is very clear and has a vision, and he is a humanitarian. He thinks about the fact that these Palestinians have nothing to go back to. They only have hate and no future right now. They live among rubble and unexploded bombs as well as destroyed buildings. There is no future. Are the other Arab countries going to come in and take care of them? Egypt is not. Jordan is not. Saudi Arabia is not. And we've got this faux hatred of Israel by the Arab countries. And what I mean by that is that the Palestinians they need to let them believe that they've been wronged by Israel so that the Palestinians don't go into their countries. So, yeah, it's terrible what Israel is doing, and the Palestinians need to keep their land because we don't want them in our country. Queen Rania of Jordan, her husband Abdullah, you know, for a while had the Palestinians there until there was Black September. And there was Arab upon Arab violence, and Palestinian and Jordanians went to war. And you've got El-Sisi saying, I don't want them. No one wants them. They went into Lebanon because Lebanon didn't have a border that was strong enough. Lebanon was almost a democratic nation. It had banking institutions. It was a major Christian nation. They had democratically elected government, and it was taken down by the PLO and Hezbollah and all those gangs. So the only future that these Palestinians have is an economic future. And that can only happen if their country is developed where there's no underground tunnels, where the kids aren't raised to hate Israel. And Trump doesn't want a nation built. Trump wants a peaceful area, just like he did with the Abraham Accords. And so his job right now is to figure out where they go in the meantime, to leverage that, and to make sure that he, quote, works with the partners in the region to get some kind of conclusion where there is ultimately peace.
Jessica, do you have a better idea?
Listen, the two-state solution that we have all wanted for decades is elusive, and unfortunately, I think it will continue to be so. And lots of people have tried to get it done and have failed, not just in the U.S. This was a huge issue for Tony Blair, who dedicated his career to trying to do this and couldn't pull it off. So, no, I personally do not have a better solution at this moment. But I know that this solution is untenable. Certainly to the Arab countries that surround Palestine, who have been clear that they are not taking these people in. The former deputy prime minister of Jordan said this is a declaration of war on the Arab people. And if he's such a humanitarian, then you take those 2 million people and you bring them here to the U.S., which is the country you are in charge of, and you resettle them. Well, I'm just saying you can't force these people down other countries' throats.
But other countries have said they'll take them. Like the Albanians are saying, we could help.
We could take a few, but you're talking about 2 million people.
Spread them out.
So,
Maybe some could go to Greenland.
If you want to know how crazy the idea is, though, you have to look no further than Susie Wiles' face as he said it. There's a great shot of her, his chief of staff, the Ice Maiden, I think they call her, looking very expressive at that moment where she was like, oh my God. What is he saying? And Mike Waltz kept it together, but he looked a little surprised too. And we know where the idea came from. Last year, Jared Kushner said, I think you could get some really great waterfront property in Gaza. It could be really beautiful. And this was widely covered. And so maybe he has been brewing this. Maybe there are some great contracts to come. But the point is that you can't just
so wait. I have to step in. I'm sorry. But first of all, on Call Me Back podcast today with Dan Senor, he and Rich Goldberg were talking about apparently Donald Trump watched the entire October 7th video on Monday. Mm-hmm. This is not something that he's like, oh, I can't wait to put my hotel down there. He's like, what was the alternative? Where's the compassion for the Palestinian people from anybody else? Nobody is saying that they would do anything for them.
But then if you are the one who's going to drop in and save everybody for it, don't you have to put some of your money where the mouth is?
We have funded Gaza more than any other country.
But what are you doing with the good people? Listen, I know that Gaza was overrun with terrorists. I've watched a significant portion of the October 7th footage. I have not watched the whole thing in its entirety. But you cannot say to all the neighboring countries that they just need to make room for millions of people that they don't want. And
why not?
Then you are the world's policeman. Then you are interventionist. Then you are going back on every promise that you made on the campaign.
States. They don't appreciate our climate or our food. Oh, so what should we do? Let them live in rubble and hate the Westerners and hate everyone else and the Jews?
Where are you shipping that? You can't make Jordan open up. You can't make
this makes the Arab world have to step up. Yeah, and it's smart.
It's not about forcing Jordan or anyone else. It's about making people realize that for economic success in that region, we need to have peace and a rebuilding of Gaza.
And instead of Jessica of saying, no, we can't, let's try yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
I loved yes, we can and hope and change.
Well, where is that? Where is the yes, we can?
Well, maybe he'll get a third
Where's
term.
the joy?
Maybe. It's already underway.
Sorry, it's non-consecutive. So.
Up next, sorry, Jessica, but it looks like the Democrats are having a bad case of Doge derangement syndrome.
We will win. We will win. We will win.
You're watching on that screen, as you can see on the left, waiting for Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who will meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the Pentagon after President Trump said that the U.S. should, quote, take over Gaza, and did not completely rule out the possibility of American forces helping on the ground there in a rebuilding process. Watch this exchange just a few moments ago in the White House press briefing. Here we go.
Should the American people be prepared to see U.S. military on the ground fighting a ground war against Hamas?
Again, the president has not committed to U.S. troops in the region.
But it is an option.
I have said that the president has not committed to that yet.
Okay, so we are waiting to hear directly from President Trump this hour. We expect it to be similar to what we've seen in recent days, the signing of executive orders in the Oval Office, and then most likely some question and answer with members of the press in there. And yesterday's meeting with Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, raising a lot of questions about what this might look like. And he's also getting a lot of credit for shaking up some old ideas and proposing some new ones with regard to finding new solutions in the Middle East. So we're going to take you there to the White House as soon as that gets underway. So some Democrats have been outraged by this idea. And from the usual corners, we are hearing some new talk of the I word, impeachment. Watch this.
The movement to impeach the president has begun. I rise to announce that I will bring articles of impeachment against the president for dastardly deeds proposed and dastardly deeds done.
So that is Democrat Al Green. He has been talking about impeachment since the very beginning of the first Trump term. So let's go to the White House now, where we find Peter Doocy. It's been very active there, as you've had press conferences with the president pretty much every day, Peter. A lot of revisiting what was heard yesterday and a look ahead to today. What are you hearing?
Well, we are hearing that this is a serious proposal from President Trump that they are to take over Gaza, that they are describing as an out-of-the-box thought. But there are big questions that remain unanswered, including how is the U.S. going to own Gaza? Who do we buy it from? In the briefing room, we heard Caroline Leavitt talking about how right now Gaza is controlled by Iran-backed Hamas terrorists. And so they're obviously trying to create a public, get the public behind this idea that the Israelis and the rest of the Middle East would rather have the United States there with a big presence instead of Hamas terrorists who could be attacking anybody at any time. But the logistics of who do we cut a check to are a little bit more complicated than the already complicated idea of, say, trying to buy Greenland, Martha.
Yeah, we have heard suggestions that, or directly really, that Saudi Arabia doesn't want the Palestinians to be removed from the Gaza Strip. And we hear from Palestinians who say they don't want to leave. However, the point is not, is well taken, I should say, when you look at these images, Peter, of how destroyed the entire area and how unlivable it is. Obviously, it needs some sort of, small scale Marshall Plan to make it inhabitable and safe for people in that area.
And President Trump's suggestion that the United States could just take over Gaza comes after his team spent the whole day describing to us how it is basically impossible for anybody to safely return. When they talk about needing 10 or 15 years to go in there, that's not 10 or 15 years to go replace some broken glass and repave the streets. That is 10 to 15 years to go get unexploded munitions, to hook up basic utilities like water and power. What they are describing would probably take longer than 15 years. The 15 years might just be to clear the entire, what they describe as a demolition site here. So there are two things that are true. A very delicate ceasefire is still just hanging by a thread. President Trump says that he doesn't really know if it's going to hold up or not. And these people have nowhere to go. Going back to Gaza does not seem like a safe idea, even though that has been the home for a lot of these refugees for their entire lives and for their families' entire lives. Entire family trees are rooted there. But they have to come up with somewhere else for these guys to go. And there have been various arguments from Middle Eastern partners about why they don't want some of these Palestinian refugees who might not have been vetted properly coming into their countries. There have been huge problems with that since October 7th. But we are being directed to the King of Jordan's visit next week, when President Trump is saying that he has heard positive reviews from partners in the Middle East. They're telling us, well, King of Jordan's coming. Let's ask him next week. And we will.
Yeah, obviously Egypt and Jordan, both large recipients of U.S. aid, and it is a strong ally relationship with Jordan and really with Egypt over the many decades as well. So we'll see if maybe there's some sort of partnership that can be developed that would provide more stability in the region through this, sort of throw the chessboard up in the air suggestion. Peter, you have covered the Biden administration, obviously, for the last 4 years, and now the first weeks of the Trump administration. So we are finding it interesting to sort of compare similar moments and meetings. So here is a look at Biden with President Naftali. And then when we hit the other play button, you'll see a clip from President Trump with Benjamin Netanyahu just yesterday. Watch this.
For the Palestinian people, a credible pathway to a state of their own. And for the region, a future of normalization.
The only reason the Palestinians want to go back to Gaza is they have no alternative. The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip.
So, obviously, very different takes, Peter.
And with Joe Biden, anytime there was a big international occurrence, they would make a point to say, okay, well, he's going to get on a virtual call with the rest of the G7 or the rest of the NATO leaders, and they're going to figure out what the best next step is. It was very, very bureaucratic, whereas Donald Trump is literally doing things backwards. He is thinking of the most unheard of idea and starting with that as a lead point in negotiations.
Well, sometimes a big idea is a shake-up moment. Peter, thank you so much. In the meantime, Iran is responding to the maximum pressure campaign and calls for immediate talks to strike a nuclear peace agreement with Iran. Iran's president insisting that they can weather any new sanctions that are thrown their way, while a senior Iranian official tells Reuters that Tehran is ready to, quote, give diplomacy with Trump another chance. But we want the U.S. to, quote, rein in Israel. Their words. Chief Foreign Correspondent Trey Yingst joins us now live from Tel Aviv. Hi, Trey.
Yeah, hey, Martha, good afternoon. A lot of developments overnight from President Trump about Iran and Gaza. The news about the Gaza Strip echoing across the region following President Trump's statement that the United States will take over Gaza. The commander-in-chief leaving open the possibility. We're going to toss it back to you, Martha. Secretary Hegseth is talking now.
All right, Trey, thank you very much. Lots going on.
President Trump now issuing an executive order to reinstate a maximum pressure campaign on Iran and its illicit oil exports. And while signing that order, the president also shared a stark warning for the Iranian government. They've been plotting to kill Trump for years. He says it would be the last thing they ever do.
And why say that you're unhappy to sign it if it's Iran and their proxies who have threatened to retaliate against you and your team by killing you guys for taking out Soleimani?
Well, they haven't done that, and that would be a terrible thing for them to do, not because of me. If they did that, they would be obliterated. That would be the end. I've left instructions. If they do it, they get obliterated. There won't be anything left. And they shouldn't be able to do it. And Biden should have said that, but he never did.
Stark warning, Kaylee.
Stark warning. There is a sentence that is chilling, and I read it in December, and I couldn't get it out of my mind. It was an Axios. This was the sentence. Iran's nuclear program has advanced dramatically during Biden's time in office, bringing Iran to the status of a de facto nuclear threshold state. Iran was out there having a big old party for 4 years. The sanctions are off. We do what we want. We unleash our proxies. We unleash Hamas to rain hell down on Israel on October 7th. But then the cop comes to town, President Trump, and they want to kill him. We know that. There was an assassination plot averted during Biden's tenure. They do not want President Trump here. He is so smart to issue this threat. He is so smart to lay down the law like he did yesterday. The media freaked out. Iran is on notice today. They're on notice, and this man is now protected thanks to the new Secret Service director.
You bring up the threat of a nuclear weapon. President Trump addressing that too last night, addressing that threat and saying this.
They cannot have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple. I'm not putting restrictions. They cannot have one thing. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. And if I think that they will have a nuclear weapon, despite what I just said, I think that's going to be very unfortunate for them.
Wow, this is going to make Iran and a lot of Democrats really uncomfortable, because notice what he didn't say. Biden said don't. He was talking in full sentences about what he will do.
Yeah, he was. And, you know, as everybody melts down, let's look at a little bit of history. I recall this. It's stuck in my mind. Somebody posed a similar question to President Bill Clinton years ago and said, what would you do in the event of an attack by Iran or a nuclear attack by Iran on America? And he put it quite succinctly. The nation of Iran, as we know it, would cease to exist.
There you go.
That's what he said. They got that message. Look, they are a de facto nuclear power. Nobody really knows. I don't care how penetrative your intel is. This is one of those things that we have to take as a fait accompli and move on from there. Let's just remember what's going on. The real divide in the Middle East is more than just Arab-Jew. It is Sunni-Shia. Right. That is really the operative thing on the street. And for whatever reason, the left tilts very heavily Shia. The Iranians are at the bottom. of almost all the machinations over there that cause a lot of trouble, from Hamas to Lebanon, across the Middle East. And Donald Trump is putting them back in the box where they belong. He's limiting their ability to project power across that Shia crescent that they wanted all the way over to Lebanon. And he's letting them know, as you say, there's a new sheriff in town. We're not going to put up with it, and let's see how they react. Because remember, hovering over all this also is the fact that Bibi Netanyahu wants to hit those nuke facilities like tomorrow.
I would say just one cautionary tale there, and that has to do with the enemy of the enemy is my friend. Don't doubt for a second that Shia and Sunni would not unite against us.
And they do. You're right. If you can take Iran out of that mix, however, I think we have much better prospects.
You know, in a nexus between this conversation and our prior one, I think respectfully to the president, it is a travesty that the security detail of Secretary of State Michael Pompeo was deactivated. I think it is a travesty that after they swore retribution, additional retribution against all of our officials, including Mike Pompeo, for the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, additional retribution in September 2020. We talk about where our tax dollars go. It is not about extinguishing expenditures altogether. It is about the appropriate stewardship. And as we warn Iran about the might that the United States of America is, that includes a protection around our elected officials and our patriots who have saved American lives by taking bold steps against those terrorist thugs and against a terrorist dictatorial state. So to me, I hope, Mr. President, you reinstate that security detail, among others. Lily, what say you?
Well, I'm concerned about the economic stability that this represents, too, for the energy sector, right? Because those illicit sales that help finance a lot of Iran's activity, over $140 billion during the past administration, is through sales between Iran and China, and then add Russia to it. So it's beyond the Middle East. It's them as commerce partners to fund a lot of this activity, hence the reason for maximum pressure. We're hearing about the tariffs. People are getting rightfully concerned. Are oil prices going to go up? Well, maybe, but there's a bigger picture to look into here.
George Birnbaum is a former chief of staff to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. David Hoffman is a former CIA station chief. He served in Moscow, Iraq, and Pakistan. He's a Fox News contributor. And most of the audience knows my friend, your friend, Joey Jones, former Marine EOD, and often someone who sat beside me on the couch at Fox and Friends. All right, guys, I want to get into this. Let me get, I'll start with you, Mr. Birnbaum, first. Your first reaction. What do you make of this moment, this idea that the U.S. would take ownership in the future of Gaza?
Well, as you stated in your opening monologue, it is an out-of-the-box idea, and it does require out-of-the-box thinking to solve not just a decades-old problem, but a centuries-old problem. For most of the past 500 years, Gaza was ruled either by the Ottomans or the British or the Egyptians, and only after 1967 did the Egyptians allow the Palestinians to settle there as refugees. And if we look at what's happened over the past year, Gaza is pretty much uninhabitable. Even from an infrastructure standpoint, all your viewers, I'm sure, saw the Israeli Defense Forces blowing up the terror tunnels that Hamas had built with cement and iron that was meant to build houses and schools and hospitals, but instead they built terror tunnels. You can't build on top of that right now. This is an enormous reconstruction project. And in order to do that, we need out-of-the-box thinking. We were told in 2005 when Ariel Sharon pulled the Israeli settlements out of Gaza that Gaza would become the Singapore of the Middle East. Well, it became another hub for terror in the Middle East. And so the only way to really change the trajectory of Gaza of the past 500 years is to start with something unique and new. And I think President Trump has got the entire world thinking in a new and unique way.
Joey, I woke up this morning. I saw many of your posts on X. You, of course, know the price of a long and unanswerable entanglement for the United States of America. You've seen it personally, obviously, in Iraq and Afghanistan. You, my friend, you have paid the price. And you were worried this morning. I saw that future Americans would pay the price for something far away like Gaza. You did hear Caroline Leavitt, though. No boots on the ground, at least at this point, nothing committed in Gaza.
Yeah, you know, Israel's a unique situation because there are so many United States citizens that are dual citizens or citizens that live there. A lot of times I think Americans have trouble understanding why is their problem our problem. And President Trump campaigned on that message. The Middle East problem isn't our problem. The problems around the world aren't our problems to fix. But then you have Israel, and it's treated differently. I don't think it's a double standard. I think people don't take the time to understand why it's differently. But at the end of the day, when the President of the United States stands there and says that the unexploded bombs and weapons will take full responsibility for, brother, that means that I'm going to, a guy like me that did what I did is going to go over there and take IEDs apart. I'm not for that at all. My intuition, my belief is that this is a part of his chess, and this is his way of getting places like maybe Saudi Arabia or Jordan to say, no, you can't have this, let us do it. Maybe it is that simple. But, I'm a hypocrite if I don't stand up and say, hey, wait just a minute. I just voted for you because you said we wouldn't get involved with more wars. So, I've got one, much like you, Will, I got one side of me saying I voted for this guy because he will scare the hell out of our enemies and say things that are hyperbole and then have a strategy behind it that's different. And the other side of me says, no matter who that person is, when they're the leader of the free world and they're talking about sending my guys and gals to war or to take apart bombs, I got to say something.
Dan, to that point, and Joey, I appreciate that answer, by the way, because I came onto the show today and I woke up this morning thinking, I can't pretend expertise on this. And I actually don't believe there is much expertise in this. And I respect, Dan, what you have done for a living. I also think most experts, when it comes to Israel and Gaza or the West Bank, have been wrong for half a century in trying to find a solution. And so why should I keep leaning back on experts who have told me this would be crazy? I woke up to that, Dan. This is crazy, right, in response to Donald Trump. Are we all taking crazy pills? But I'm hearing that, Dan, from people who never got it right for 50 years. They didn't solve it. So why do we dismiss this as a potential solution?
Yeah, I covered President Trump's summits with Kim Jong-un, and this is a little reminiscent of when the president discussed with Kim Jong-un how he could turn North Korea into the same economic powerhouse if the Hermit Kingdom were opened up to the rest of the world. That's just kind of the way President Trump thinks. Now, look, the biggest obstacle right now are the thousands of Hamas fighters in Gaza. If the United States were to send our troops into Gaza, we'd be involved in an armed conflict there. There's no chance at the moment for post-conflict reconstruction, but it's worth talking about it. And what I think the president was doing yesterday is he's trying to kind of shape the narrative for how we're going to discuss the post-conflict reconstruction. He's talking about what we would like it to look like. We know we need to engage our allies in the region, specifically Egypt, Jordan, and our Gulf partners, as well as Israel. It's a complicated, messy kaleidoscope. But look, it's a discussion point, and that's what this president does.
So, Dan, you laid out sort of the phases of this. Phase one is to eradicate Hamas. Phase two is to figure out what to do with the Palestinians in a short term. Phase three is what Donald Trump perhaps is talking about now, the long-term future of Gaza. So, Mr. Birnbaum, back to you on the Palestinians. I don't want to dismiss this, okay? Because the interested parties we talk about in the region, and for now we'll focus in on Egypt and Jordan, okay? That's the suggestion of where they would go. They don't want the Palestinians. They've made that very clear. And the reason for that is they consider it an existential threat to their kingdoms, be it in Egypt or the Kingdom of Jordan. Now, I recognize that President Trump plans to talk to them in the coming weeks. But for them, they worry about the Palestinians upending their power into the future for, say, in Jordan.
Yes, well, let's first remember that it requires a change in paradigm to really move things forward. We were told basically since 1967 that until we solve the Palestinian problem, Israel will not be able to make peace with its Arab neighbors. Donald Trump, in his first presidency, came along, Abraham Accords, changed the paradigm. We can, in fact, have peace with our Arab neighbors prior to solving the Palestinian solution. Now, let's also remember that Jordan is 60% Palestinian in terms of their population. It's not as if they're not going to be taking a population that doesn't already exist within their country. I certainly believe that Donald Trump has the ability to think out of the box and find a way to get these two countries to see things differently that benefit both their own countries, but the broader Middle East as well, as he did with the initial Abraham Accord negotiations when it came to the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and other neighbors.
Right. Yeah, I don't think we should be in the business of doubting Donald Trump that's not sycophancy, that's not partisanship. That's being able to read the past. That's being able to read the room. And so I mentioned it earlier. I'm going to play this for you, Joey, our current and always future friend, but our former co-host, Pete Hegseth, now the Secretary of Defense. He said this, as I mentioned, the definition of insanity. Watch.
I would just say to the question of Gaza, the definition of insanity is attempting to do the same thing over and over and over again. And as the President and Prime Minister pointed out last night, the President is willing to think outside the box, look for new and unique dynamic ways to solve problems that have felt like they're intractable. So we look forward to more conversations about that, creative solutions to that.
While I'm short on time, Joey, I'll leave it to you. We're both struggling with both sides of this debate. What do you think about what we hear from the Secretary of Defense?
Yeah, after hearing Caroline talk today and Pete talk today and the president talk again, I think this is the president saying, if in the middle doesn't work for you, let me pull it all the way to the other side. And now let's see where you are. If you can't live peacefully, then we'll just take it. And then maybe now there's a renewed energy to live peacefully and get others involved like Egypt or Jordan. I think that is the end game. But, you know, if you had a United States-owned Gaza, that would be the largest target for terrorism in the world. And I'm not there for that.
I mean it when I say this conversation could and should probably go on for another half hour. I appreciate your time, all of you. It's thoughtful, and I hope we can continue it. Dan, George, Joey, thank you.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job, do something different.
Do something different. That is the shakeup that was prompted by this discussion last night, discussing a potential U.S. role in the Gaza Strip. Now, the comments came after the joint news conference yesterday with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Joining us now is National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. Great to have you with us today. Thanks for joining us. Can you give us a sense? I think this caught a lot of people by surprise, Secretary Waltz. So tell us a little bit about, when did you get in the loop on this proposal last night and this idea? And were you immediately on board with it?
Yeah. Hi, Martha. Actually, this is something that the president's been thinking about quite a bit, even since October 7th. But then, Special Envoy Witkoff has been traveling. We've been talking. He's been receiving a number of briefings. And again, if you look at his engagement, one of the first foreign leader he called, Mohammed bin Salman from Saudi. We have King Abdullah coming next week. He spoke to President Sisi of Egypt on Saturday. And of course, we just had as a first foreign visit Prime Minister Netanyahu. So this didn't just, I know the mainstream media wants to pretend like this just sprung up overnight. And really, this is framed, but it's just not the case. This is framed in terms of the hostages that we have coming out. You remember the president's truth on there will be all hell to pay. We now see Israelis and the first American, Keith Siegel, being reunited with their family, a ceasefire in place that the Biden administration has been trying to get for over a year and couldn't without President Trump's help. And then now the discussion last night is let's talk in practical, humane terms about what's going to happen to 2 million people who are living in piles of rubble, no sewage, no sanitation. It's a wasteland with bullets flying. Let's talk real solutions here, and then eventually we get to Saudi normalization and all those pieces. This is part of a much broader strategy.
If I may, let me ask you, you talked about phone calls with Saudi leadership, with Egyptian leadership, Jordanian leadership. Was this plan shared with them on those phone calls, and how did they react? And are they willing to take 2 million Palestinians into their territory while the United States takes control of it to help it rebuild?
Well, as the president said last night, it's not just 1, 2, 3, or even 4. It could be multiple nations involved. We welcome their proposals, but the practical reality is for 10, 15 years, I don't know that we have 2 million people literally living in tents with barely surviving. So those things were discussed. And Martha, I'll just take you back to moving our embassy to Jerusalem. Recognizing the Golan Heights, even the idea of peace with the Abraham Accords were all labeled impossible and fantastical and ridiculous in his first term. And now it's happened. So President Trump is unorthodox. He is thinking big. But he is also, if you actually listen to his words, thinking about, what is a real alternative for the Palestinian people to live in peace and have a bright future for the next
But
generation. And then as a builder, what's practical in getting rid of all of that unexploded ordnance, all of that rubble, and actually being able to rebuild?
It's in crisis mode right now. And you think about Tel Aviv on the Mediterranean and what a great city it is, and the potential for this area is clear. And it's something we've heard President Trump talk about for quite some time. I'm just curious.
Or even, Martha, what Beirut was, it was called the Paris of the Mediterranean
and I know
years
he
ago.
feels that way about Iran as well, that it can be great again itself. But I'm just curious because obviously, what was the Saudi reaction or the Egyptian reaction to this idea of the United States taking control of this area for a while and the Palestinians being absorbed in those surrounding countries? Are they open to that? Did they say, yes, we are willing to do that?
Historically, they have been opposed. But I think the president's point is, has anyone really asked and sat down and worked with all of these countries? Everyone's heart breaks for the Palestinians. But then let's start talking real solutions for them that actually work on the ground. And anyone who walks the ground, as Steve Witkoff just did, sees that it is literally a wasteland of rubble and no one can reasonably live there for, over a decade that we think it's going to take to rebuild. So let's talk those practical solutions. Let's keep getting our hostages out. But at the same time, we cannot allow Hamas to conduct future October 7th. They have to be destroyed and removed from power. And the Palestinian people have ultimately been the victim of this terrorist dictatorship that launched this war in the first place and caused this destruction.
And Netanyahu is on board. He would like the United States to take over the Gaza Strip.
Well, look, there is all kinds of forms of ownership. I think we have the deal maker in chief sitting right there in the same seat as the commander in chief. And all of those discussions are ongoing. But he is casting a big, broad, bold vision. And this won't be the first time we've seen the world come along.
National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, thank you so much. It's great to have you with us today. More to come. Thank you, sir.